The scream halted me mid-step. I had been in the kitchen, coffee pot in hand, with the scent of toast still hanging in the air. It was the sort of ordinary morning that tricks you into forgetting how quickly life can turn cruel. There was no shattering sound, no breaking glass, just a sudden, piercing scream, sharp, brief, the kind that slices through calm like a blade and vanishes just as fast. I froze. My daughter was supposed to be out in the garage, working on a painting she'd started the day before. She loved that spacey, her creative hideaway where she could be all out, messy, and completely herself. I called out to her, once, then again. Silence. I stepped outside, noticing the garage door was slightly ajar, letting a thin beam of sunlight stretch across the floor. That's when I saw Ida, a thick, jagged streak of red trailing across the concrete. At first, I thought she'd spilled paint, maybe knocked something over. But as I got closer, my chest grew heavy. That wasn't paint. It was blood, afresh, dark, and unmistakably real. My heart pounded in my ears as I pushed the door open. There she was, collapsed on the floor, her small hands trembling, her white shirt drenched in red. Her legs were twisted beneath her, her fascia pale, stricken, frozen in a kind of shock too deep for tears. For a few seconds, I forgot how to move, forgot how to breathe. I could only drop to my knees beside her and scream her name. She blinked slowly, dazed, like her mind was still trying to catch up to the moment. That's when I noticed the hole in the wall. The sharp scent of gunpowder hung in the air. The silence around us thickened, suffocating. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone, the numbers blurring as I dialed. I begged the dispatcher to hurry, pleaded for help. My daughter was bleeding out on the cold garage floor, and I had no idea if she would survive. Cradling her close, whispering over and over that help was coming, I looked across the street. Karen's house stood quiet, her front door shut, porch empty. But I already knew. I didn't need to see her face to know who was responsible. What I didn't know was why. La came into the world with laughter in her lungs and light in her eyes. From the moment I first held her, I sensed she was different, and not in the way doctors whispered about, or strangers offered pitying smiles, but in a way that made joy seem sacred, as if it lived inside her and radiated out just by her presence. She didn't just brighten rooms, she warmed them. We named her La after the lilac tree in my grandmother's yard. That tree bloomed stubbornly, even in harsh seasons. La was like that too, fragile, perhaps, but fiercely spirited. She was born with a mild neuromuscular condition. It made coordination tricky, walking a challenge, balance even harder. Doctors gave us the usual prognosis, delayed milestones, the need for therapy, a different kind of childhood ahead. But what they didn't prepare us for was how incredibly beautiful different could be. La didn't view her condition as something to hide or fight. She accepted it like a unique thread in her tapestry. One of many, not the whole. She hated wearing shoes, said they made her feel trapped. Socks were her favorite, always mismatched, always bright. She'd dance across our hardwood floors, arms wide, spinning like a top, laughing until she fell over. That was her joy, wild, unfiltered, hers. Every night, she'd demand music, usually something silly, like an old cartoon song, and spin until she tumbled to the ground, giggling. That was her kind of freedom. Colors fascinated her. Every picture she drew included a rainbow, even if it was just of a cat or a house. Once, she told me, "I think colors are how God talks when he doesn't want to use words." I never understood how a 6-year-old could say something like that, but she always looked at the world through eyes older than her years. She didn't have many friends her age. Some kids didn't get why she wore leg braces or why she fell sometimes, but she didn't let that keep her down. Instead, she found companionship in the janitor, the crossing guard, the lunch lady. Anyone who smiled back became part of her world. She adored animals, especially cats. There was a stray that roamed our street, and every evening, she'd wait for it by the driveway with a saucer of milk. Often, it never shouted, but she always waited, whispering, "Maybe it's having a rough day." She had a gift for seeing the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it, and I worried the world would hurt someone so trusting. She waved at strangers, left crayon drawings in neighbors' mailboxes. She even gave one to Karen long before things got dark. A simple drawing of Karen's house and 2 stick figures holding hands. Karen never acknowledged it. Lo was curious about everything. Every car ride turned into a string of questions. Why do stars twinkle? If someone lies down in snow, do they melt? If someone's mean but they love their dog, are they still mean? She didn't just want answers, she wanted to connect. Our mornings were full of chaos, mismatched clothes, jelly fingerprints, music echoing from the bathroom as she brushed her teeth. Evenings brought stories of fairy tales that she always rewrote. Why does the prince always save the princess? What if the princess saved the dragon instead? She imagined a world that was softer, kinder, and in her own small way, she built Ida one chalk drawing at a time, one smile to a grumpy neighbor at a time. She never saw danger, only possibility. She didn't believe cruelty was permanent, just sadness wearing a disguise. She was light, brilliant, fearless, radiant light. That's why, when I found her lying there, bleeding, when I saw what had been done, it wasn't just a tragedy. It felt like something sacred had been violated, as if someone had aimed at the heart of innocent Sofa and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Because Lil wasn't just a little girl, she was proof that goodness still lived in a world that too often forgets it. She believed the world would be as kind to her as she was to it. She believed in people, she believed in Karen, and that faith almost took everything from her. When we first moved into the neighborhood, it felt like the beginning of a peaceful chapter. The streets were quiet, lawns trimmed with care, and the sound of children laughing echoed down the cul-de-sac. After years of bouncing from rental to rental, juggling doctor visits and therapy sessions, this little patch of suburbia felt like the stability we had long yearned for. The house wasn't large, but it was full of warmth, light, and most importantly designed to meet Le's needs. The gently sloping driveway, wide doors, and garage-turned art studio made it a perfect fit. The community, governed by HOA, promised safety and order. We were more than willing to accept the rules if it meant we could finally belong. In the beginning, everything seemed ideal. Neighbors smiled politely, waved as we passed. A few even stopped by with cookies, and Le handed them her crayon masterpieces in return. She loved sitting on the porch in the evenings, waving at anyone who glanced her way. Joggers, mail carriers, even delivery drivers. It was a rare stretch of calm, a sweet, uneventful peace that made us believe we'd finally found our place. But even in peace, tension can quietly bloom. There were shadows, subtle and still, watching from the edges. One of them lived right across the street. Karen never introduced herself, never smiled, never waved. Her house was immaculate, to the point of obsession. Hedges trimmed with military precision, porch swept daily, shutters repainted far too often. Each morning, Lo waved to her with the same hopefulness in her voice, but Karen never once returned the gesture. She just stood behind her blinds, half-drawn, silently tracking our every move. We tried to ignore it, told ourselves that not everyone is outgoing. Maybe she was shy, or just kept to herself. Then the notes started. The first was taped to our mailbox. Please keep sidewalk clear for pedestrian use. We were confused. The only thing close to the sidewalk was Le's small ramp barely raised off the ground. Still, we adjusted it slightly, just to be safe. The following week brought another message. Chalk art on walkways violates community rules. That one hurt. Look, I'd spent hours covering the sidewalk with her drawings of suns, butterflies, stars. I gently suggested she switch to the driveway instead. She didn't understand. It's happy art, she told me. It's for everyone. We never heard from the HOA directly, but the notes continued, growing more pointed each time. Excessive and noisy, a reference to the therapy van that came twice a week. Yard clutter, likely aimed at her tricycle and a few toys we hadn't brought in yet. No one ever knocked. No one ever asked. It was all passive, all anonymous, but it was clear who was behind it. Karen's blinds would twitch anytime we stepped outside. She'd come out and sweep leaves that weren't there, loitering near the edge of our yard, watching with narrowed eyes. Then came the whispers. One neighbor said Karen had raised concerns at the last HOA meeting, complaints about certain families bringing down property values. Another mentioned she'd lived on the street for over 15 years and liked things just so. Gradually, we noticed the shift. People we chatted with stopped waving. Conversations grew shorter. Doors closed a little faster when we walked by. It wasn't overt hostility, but it was a chill that spread slowly through the block. Still, We tried to stay positive, for Ella's sake. She kept drawing, kept waving at Karen every morning, kept taping glittery notes to neighbors' doors that read "Have a happy day," with smiley faces and stars, and somehow, we convinced ourselves the ice would thaw, that kindness could outlast suspicion, that maybe, just maybe, she'd eventually warm up to us. But she didn't. Karen's glare grew colder, her notes sharper. We reported the harassment to the HOA, hoping for support, but they brushed it off as minor neighbor disputes. Even when we shared photos of the notes, described the pattern, mentioned the time Karen stood outside watching Lil for nearly 20 minutes, they refused to act. "We don't take sides," they said. "Try to resolve it among yourselves." We didn't realize how deep her disdain truly ran. We thought it was about chalk, sidewalks, noise complaints. We didn't understand it had evolved into something far more dangerous, something festering, something that would one day manifest as a gun in her hand. Back then, we still believed this was a storm waiting to break. We didn't know we were already standing in the rain. At first, Karen seemed merely distant and unfriendly, maybe even a little cold, a neighbor who minded her business and ignored ours. But at some point, that coldness congealed into something sharper, something laced with bitterness. It didn't happen overnight. It built, slow and steady, like water creeping into a crack until it splits everything open. It began with those carefully worded notes, always unsigned, always just civil enough to seem reasonable, but soaked with contempt. One criticized our recycling bin for being too visible. Another claimed the therapy van was disturbing the peace. The day I tried speaking to Karen in person, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "People move here for quiet, not constant commotion." I was stunned. We had done everything to be respectful. Lo wasn't loud. The therapy van came twice a week, stayed less than an hour. I didn't argue. I thought maybe she just needed time to get used to us. I thought foolishly that if we gave her space, she'd come around. We just wanted to live like everyone else. I clung to that belief far longer than I should have. And then Karen stopped pretending. One morning, Lo was outside doing what she loved most, drawing butterflies and chalk on the sidewalk before her therapy session, a little ritual she cherished. I stood inside by the window, smiling as I watched her. That joy, however, was shattered in an instant. Karen walked out of her house with a hose in hand. Without saying a word, she began spraying the sidewalk aggressively, washing away Ella's drawings. My daughter sat just feet away, frozen, clutching her chalk with confusion in her eyes. I rushed outside, furious. "What are you doing?" I demanded. She didn't even bother to look at me. "Cleaning," she said flatly. "The sidewalk isn't your daughter's personal art studio." I turned to let her eyes were glassy, on the verge of tears. She didn't understand, and I didn't know how to explain such cruelty without breaking something inside myself. It was the first time Karen made me cry. Sadly, it wasn't the last. After that, Karen didn't bother with subtlety. She muttered nasty comments as we passed. Once, while we were unloading groceries, she called out from her porch, "Maybe teach your daughter not to block the whole driveway with her wheelchair." Stunned, I snapped back, "She's a child, a disabled child." Karen rolled her eyes. "Everyone's got something these days. Doesn't mean they get to inconvenience everyone else." That word inconveniencia stuck like a splinter. That's what she saw when she looked at my daughter. Not a child, not a neighbor, not a human being, just a disruption. Her campaign escalated. She began filing complaints directly to the HOA. We received formal notices about non-compliant exterior equipment, a clear reference to Lo's mobility ramp. Then came another about unauthorized decorations, all because we'd hung a small wind chime outside Lo's window, something she adored watching. I wrote to the HOA, explained the medical necessity, even offered documentation. Their response was cold and formulaic. The association must maintain fairness and consistency in applying the rules. Fairness had become a sanitized excuse for silence. Then one day, Liz said something that chilled me to the bone. "Karen doesn't like me." I asked why she thought that. "Because she told me," Liz replied quietly. "She said I shouldn't be here, that I scare her dog, that I laugh too loud." I was paralyzed. I wanted to storm across the street, confront her, demand answers. But I didn't. I couldn't, because I was afraid of what she might do if pushed. That's when we installed a security camera, just a simple one facing the driveway. Within days, a new note appeared in our mailbox. Use of surveillance equipment may violate HOA guidelines. The hypocrisy was suffocating. Karen could spy on us from behind her blinds every hour of the day, but the moment we tried to feel secure, we were the ones in the wrong. By then, look, I'd stopped wanting to play outside. She asked to stay indoors more often. She didn't want to draw, didn't want to wave at neighbors. The porch, once her stage of joy, had become a place she avoided. She never said she was scared, but I saw it. In her eyes, in the way she flinched when a door slammed, in the way she hesitated before stepping outside. Karen had stolen something from her, something soft and irreplaceably her sense of safety. Her innocent belief that the world would meet her kindness with kindness. I tried everything. I spoke to the HOA, documented every note, every incident, begged someone to intervene. They never did. It's a neighbor disagreement, they said. Not a legal matter. But it was more than that. It was a deliberate, drawn-out campaign of cruelty, a slow erosion of peace. And the worst part? We still believed it wouldn't go further, that she wouldn't actually do something. We were so wrong. We had no idea how far Karen would go. It was a Saturday morning like any other, deceptively calm, the kind of morning where everything feels so normal, so safe, that you begin to let your guard down. Sunlight filtered gently over the neighborhood. Birds chirped lazily. The air was still and peaceful, almost too peaceful. The smell of pancakes drifted through the house. Uzila's favorite. She had eaten quickly and rushed out to the garage to begin work on her new chalk mural. She'd been planning it all week, a sky garden with rainbow wings. She called it. That was her world. Butterflies, colors, magic, and she wanted to share it. She had set up in the garage, the door half open to let in the light. I could hear her humming to herself, inventing a new tune, different every day, always sweet. As she drew, she spoke to her butterflies. This one's name is Luna, she whispered. She likes blueberry pancakes. This one's scared of thunder, but she's very brave. I listened from the kitchen, smiling to myself, letting her be. That calm is so rare these days. It felt like a blessing. I told myself, today will be good. I should have known better. Around 9:30, it happened. No warning, no scream, no shouting, just a sound that split the morning in half. A sharp, violent crack, out of place. Jarring. I froze. My brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe a tool had fallen, a car had backfired, something normal. Then came the silence, too long, too deep. The kind of silence that tightens around your lungs. I bolted. Instinct took over. I ran barefoot to the garage, calling La's name. The moment I stepped inside, I saw her. Her body crumpled on the ground. Chalk scattered around her like fallen petals. Pink and blue smudges blending with something darker. Blood, thick, red, spreading. She was lying there, arms stretched out, a broken piece of chalk still clutched in her hand. Her head was tilted at a strange angle, her eyes open, blinking slowly like the pain hadn't fully reached her yet. And I screamed, dropped to my knees beside her, heart pounding, helpless. My heart was pounding so fiercely it drowned out every sound. My hands hovered in the air, trembling, useless. I didn't know where to touch her, what to do, how to help. Her beautiful, expressive face was streaked with blood. There was a clean tear across her cheek, far too close to her eye. Her lips moved. I leaned in. It hurt, she whispered. My fingers fumbled as I pulled out my phone, dialing 911 with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I couldn't even tell you what I said. The words tumbled out in fragments. A gun, child, bleeding, and my voice cracking into something unrecognizable. I rocked her in my arms, pressing my sleeve to her wound, trying to keep her awake, trying to keep her here. And then, just outside the garage, I saw her, Karen, standing on her driveway, one hand hanging limp at her side, the other holding a gun. No tears, no panic, just stillness, like she'd broken a dish and was waiting to be scolded. Our eyes locked. She didn't look ashamed, she didn't run, she didn't even flinch. It was an accident, she said. Her voice was flat, too calm, too prepared. I think she said more, but I didn't hear it. I wasn't listening. I was holding my daughter, trying to keep her alive, whispering desperate prayers that she wouldn't close her eyes, that she wouldn't stop breathing, that help would get there in time. And then sirens, red and blue, flooded the garage. Lights flashing like a surreal fever dream. Paramedics rushed in, lifting Liv from my arms with practiced urgency. "She's conscious, a pulse steady, let's go." One of them called. I followed, my legs barely keeping up, my mind swimming. Neighbors had gathered in clusters, whispering, pointing, faces painted with concern and disbelief. No one went to Karen. Police encircled her with weapons drawn, barking orders. She placed the gun on the ground like it was a misplaced purse, calm and detached, then sat on the curb with her hands on her knees like she was waiting for a ride, not like someone who had just shot a child. They let her speak to the officers right there on the sidewalk. She repeated her story. She'd heard a sound, thought someone was in her yard, believed it was a threat. She called it a warning shot. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she said, "but she did. She hurt my daughter physically, emotionally, irreversibly." She shattered Liv's sense of safety, of joy, of freedom. And she didn't even try to help. She didn't drop the weapon and run over. She didn't scream for aid. She just stood there and watched. That was the day everything changed. The day Karen's quiet cruelty turned into violence. The day her hate became loud enough to leave a scar. Liv would survive via, but she would never be the same. None of us would. Because once you hear a gunshot echo through a place you believed was safe, it stays with you. You carry it. And worse than the sound is the silence that follows it. The silence of neighbors who look away, of systems that do nothing. The ambulance ride was a blur. Lights strobed against the walls. Voices swirled around me, but all I could see was Liz strapped to the stretcher, her small hands limp, her face pale beneath blood-soaked gauze. I tried to climb in beside her, but a paramedic held out a gloved hand. "We'll stabilize her. Meet us at County General," he said, voice neutral, professional, detached. I nodded, but my soul was still back on the garage floor. I don't remember the drive to the hospital, the traffic lights, the turns. They're all a blank. What I do remember is the ache in my chest growing heavier with each second. I kept seeing her fascia, her blinking, frightened eyes, a broken bar, the blood running into her, or a broken bar, the crushed chalk beneath her elbow like a broken toy. I kept hearing the sound, the gunshot, and Karen's voice, flat, practiced. It was an accident, like she'd dropped a vase, like my daughter was collateral damage to her moment of fear. When I reached the staff rushed me inside. They already knew who I was. A nurse guided me to a waiting room, a small, sterile, humming with fluorescent light and tension. I sat in a hard plastic chair, hand stained with Liv's blood. It had started to dry, curling in the creases of my palms. I couldn't look away from it. 20 minutes later, but it felt like years. The doctor came. His expression was serious, but not panicked. "She's stable," he said. The bullet grazed her cheekbone, missed her eye by millimeters. "She'll need stitches. We're monitoring for shock and infection. Boot to broken bar. She's alive." Alive. The word dropped into my chest like a stone. Beautiful, precious, crushing. I thanked him, but the words stuck in my throat. I wasn't ready for relief. Not yet. When I finally saw her, she was unconscious, wires attached, monitors beeping steadily. Her face was swollen, bruised, stitched. One of her arms was bandaged. Her little fingers were curled, as if still holding chalk. I sat beside her, brushing her hair away from her face with trembling fingers, whispering her name again and again. "Baby, broken bar, mom is here." Meanwhile, the outside world had already started twisting the story. Karen told police she thought someone was sneaking into her yard. She claimed she heard movement near the bushes and panicked. She said it was a misfire. "I didn't know it was a child," she insisted. She didn't call for help. She didn't try to explain. She just stood there watching, waiting for it all to blow over. And somehow it did. They didn't arrest her. They didn't handcuff her. After giving a brief statement and answering a few questions, Karen walked back into her house. That same house with its pristine hedges and flower boxes and shuttered windows. That night, while I sat in a hospital chair praying my daughter would open her eyes again, Karen slept in her own bed, surrounded by the silence she'd learned to wield like a weapon. And justice? It never showed up. That day, there were no apologies, no acknowledgement, just blood on the pavement, sirens screaming through the silence, and a community too afraid of confrontation to see a child lying broken on the garage floor. That kind of silence, it's not neutral, it's a weapon. the loudest kind of violence wrapped in quiet. While we sat in the hospital, whispering prayers over Liz's stitched face and unmoving body, Karen wasted no time doing what she does best, rewriting the story. Before we could even catch our breath, before Liz could open her eyes, Karen had already begun spinning a tale, and to our disbelief, people started listening. It started subtly, a vague post in the neighborhood Facebook group, still shaken by recent events, keeping all involved in my prayers. Fear is a terrible thing when you're just trying to protect your home. No names, none needed, everyone knew, and the comments came in droves. So sorry, Karen, you were scared, you did what anyone would do. We're with you. I read those words while sitting under fluorescent lights in the waiting room, my daughter unconscious a few doors down with 4 lines in her arms, while Karen played the part of the frightened homeowner, the one caught off guard, the one who meant no harm. She said she heard a noise, claimed she thought it was an animal. She never said she saw it because that would mean admitting she fired a gun toward a child. Instead, she wrapped her actions in the language of fear and safety, about how dangerous the world is, how quick decisions have to be made, how it wasn't really her fault. And then came another post, this one anonymous but unmistakably from her corner of the neighborhood. It's sad what people will do for attention. Not everything is a crime, some just like playing the victim. That was the moment the story twisted. We weren't just grieving parents anymore. We were suddenly suspect, manipulative, opportunistic, and somehow, Karen, the one who fired the gun, became the one being bullied. Online, in group chats, behind the curtains, we turned to the HO, hoping for even the mildest statement of support, of basic decency. But what we received was a sterile, neutered email. The HO urges all residents to avoid speculation while law enforcement completes its investigation. We remain neutral in civil and criminal disputes between homeowners. Neutral. A child had been shot in her own garage, and they called it neutrality. Not one word about La. No mention of concern, just carefully worded silence, a passive warning to stay quiet, and worse, people bought into it. The same neighbors who once smiled at La began looking away. Texts went unanswered. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. One even said, "I'm not taking sides," before adding, "Karen's always been so careful." She must have really felt threatened, as if fear gives you permission to aim a gun at a child. We weren't seen as a family healing from trauma anymore. We were the problem. Our GoFundMe, created to cover hospital bills, was passed around with sarcastic comments. Convenient timing. One person even suggested we were exploiting the incident for donations, as if any parent would trade their child's safety for sympathy. Karen knew exactly what she was doing. She hadn't just fired a bullet, she'd launched a narrative, one where she was the victim, one where we were the disruption. And for a moment, God help USA, it worked. But we weren't going to let that stand. We weren't chasing money, we were chasing truth. After La came home, stitched, pale, and heartbreakingly quiet for a child who once danced barefoot in mismatched socks. Something in us hardened. We were no longer just grieving, we were furious. Furious at the silence, at the neighbors who smiled and said nothing, at the HO that kept hiding behind policies, and most of all, at Karina, who strolled past our house like nothing had happened, like she hadn't pulled a trigger, like she hadn't taken something sacred from our little girl. So, we fought back. The first step was legal. We began searching for someone willing to take on the impossible, a civil case against a neighbor, within a private HO, where power was disguised as order and silence masqueraded as fairness. We found here Denise Grant, a civil rights attorney with a spine of steel and a track record of punching holes through systems built to stay quiet. She sat in our living room, flipping through La's medical charts, therapy records, printed emails, HO complaints, and our meticulously written timeline. Then she looked up and said, "They're hoping you'll disappear." We won't. And just like that, we began to build. We gathered everything: hospital reports, therapy assessments, camera footage, copies of ignored complaints, and Denise started to move. That day, there were no apologies, no acknowledgement, just sirens, blood, and a neighborhood too scared to take us idea, so they chose to look away. And that kind of silence, it's the most violent thing of all. As we sat in the hospital, clinging to hope and whispering over Liz's still body, Karen did what she always did: seized control. Before our daughter could even open her eyes, Karen was already reshaping the narrative. A vague post appeared in the neighborhood Facebook group. Shaken by recent events, praying for peace. Fear is powerful when all you want is safety. No names, no specifics, but everyone knew. And then came the chorus of sympathy, not for Ella, but for Karen. We're here for you, Karen. You did what you had to do. I read the comments while sitting in a plastic chair beneath sterile lights, my daughter's face stitched and pale down the hallway. And while Karen played the part of the misunderstood victim, the scared woman who meant no harm, another post began to circulate. Sad what some people will do for attention. Not every tragedy is a crime. Some people just like being victims. That was the moment the blade twisted. We weren't just grieving parents anymore, we were now villains in someone else's story, accused of fabricating, exaggerating, manipulating, and somehow, Karen, the one with the gun, had become the one who was bullied. We went to the HOA, hoping still for decency, for truth. But instead we received a bland, soulless email. The HOA encourages residents to refrain from speculation while authorities complete their investigation. We remain neutral in civil and criminal disputes. Neutral. A child was shot in her garage, and their response was silence dressed as professionalism. Not one sentence for Ella. Not one breath of concern. Only warnings to stay quiet. And worse, some neighbors agreed. The same people who once accepted cookies from Ella now avoided our eyes. One woman said, "Karen's always been so careful. She must have really been scared." As if fear ever justifies firing a gun toward a child. The whispers grew louder. Our GoFundMe set up to help with medical bills was shared with captions like, "Convenient timing, isn't it?" People accused us of exploiting the incident. As if we wanted this. As if anyone would trade their child's safety for sympathy. But Karen didn't just fire a bullet, she launched a lie. And for a terrifying moment, it started to work. That's when we decided to go public. We contacted a local news station and told the truth. All of it. The notes, the ignored complaints, the gunshot, the silence. The article ran with a photo of Ella, her face soft and smiling beneath butterfly lips. Next to the headline, "Family seeks justice after daughter shot by neighbor." And something changed. The comments turned. Support flooded in. Donations came without judgment. Other families spoke up, and mothers, fathers, neighbors who had been silenced too. We realized we weren't alone, and we weren't just fighting for Ella anymore. We were fighting for everyone who's ever been told to shut up and accept it. Then came the courtroom. It was cold, clinical, but the air buzzed with quiet urgency. This wasn't just a trial. It was a reckoning. Karen sat just feet away, neatly dressed in gray, her face still blank. But when the jury entered and cameras began to roll, she slipped back into the mask of the frightened woman who made a tragic mistake. Her lawyers painted a picture of a woman overwhelmed, startled, deeply remorseful. She wept on the stand, dabbing carefully at dry eyes with a tissue. But while Karen cried for herself, Ella sat beside me, clutching a soft toy, her face still marked by the pale scar Karen left. And that scar said more than anything we could say. When I took the stand, I didn't just speak about the day of the shooting, I told them everything. The notes, the isolation, the escalating tension. I spoke of Ella's joy, her sidewalk chalk, her sock dances, her giggles. And I told them what I saw in Karen that day: not fear, control, not panic, precision. Our lawyer laid it all out: photos, medical records, security footage, HOA complaints, even Karen's own social media posts. And when the image of Ella's bloodied face lit the courtroom screen, the jury sat frozen in silence. Then, finally, after months of being disbelieved, the verdict came: guilty. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, reckless endangerment, community endangerment. There was no celebration, no cheers, just a quiet breath we didn't know we'd been holding. Karen was taken into custody on the spot, her face finally cracked. Outside, people gathered, not just reporters, supporters, families who had followed our story, who saw themselves in us. It wasn't justice, not fully, but it was something. It was a beginning. We moved 3 months later, not to flee but to heal. Our old house wasn't just brick and glass, it had been Ella's world, her butterflies, her joy. But after the shooting, that light was gone. The garage held shadows we could never scrub out. So we left. Our new home is smaller, quieter, but full of warmth. There's no no peeking blinds, just space. Look has her own art room now. Walls lined with canvases, soft music playing. She's painting again. She's dancing again, barefoot in socks, twirling slowly across the floor. She still stumbles, but she always gets back up. Her laughter isn't the same. It's quieter, more cautious, but it's returning. She still wears her butterfly clips, still draws rainbows, still names imaginary animals as Sparkle, Wiggle Paws, Moonbeam. But now, when she hears a bang, a slammed door, a dropped plate, fireworks, as she flinches, her innocence is intact, but scarred. One night, as I tucked her in, she asked me, "Is it okay to be happy again?" And I said, "Yes, baby. It's not just okay, it's necessary. Happiness is how we fight back. It's how we heal." She still dances with one eye on the door, but she dances, because healing isn't forgetting, it's choosing joy even when you know what the world can do. And in this new house, with every gentle laugh and every bold brush stroke, we're building something stronger than safe. We're building hope. If this story moved you, don't let it fade in silence. Share it, speak up, shine a light on the voices too often ignored. No family should have to fight alone. No child should lose their safety because of someone else's hate. Subscribe to HOA Stories for more real, raw, and powerful stories from families who dared to stand up, because when the community turns its back, we tell the truth. Tools